All right, Dr. Arturo, we are live. Thank you so much. I know you had a hectic day today, and I really appreciate when doctors, slice some time off to give us the tea talk. So thank you very much for being here, and just giving us your time. We're looking forward to talking to you about the subject at hand. Why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, thank you so much, Sharon. So, Arturo Loaiza-Bonilla, I'm a medical oncologist, entrepreneur, co-founder, chief medical officer of Massive Bio, and a very passionate doctor into finding clinical trials for my patients and for other patients, deriving from my own experience. Not only as a physician myself, but as a caregiver, and my brother had leukemia, and that bolstered my interest in cancer and my career for many years now. So nice to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to share a few questions about how to use technology to help patients to find options.
Yes. Thank you for sharing about your brother. So you're a GI oncologist, and is that the reason why you got into that space because of your brother, or that was
Yeah, so I wanted to be a physician in my family because there was no one who actually was a doctor. And now there's more than me, but I was the first one. And once I got into residency, working in Baltimore at Hopkins, my brother had leukemia. So we started to work into, became very personal to me to work into research and clinical trials and biomarkers and treatment options. And since then, it's been a journey of learning and, personal, professional growth and learning how difficult it is for many patients to navigate the waters of cancer diagnosis and treatments. And that's one of the reasons why it inspired me to focus on research, focus on helping patients as much as possible in my own practice and beyond to look at their whatever options they have. They need to have all the information in front of them.
I agree. It's so interesting the way how circumstances in life just shape our trajectory. So you're the co-founder of Massive Bio, which we need to get some more information on. What I know about it is that it is a company that leverages telehealth, genomics, artificial intelligence, and concierge services to help patients and doctors find an easier path to finding and enrolling on a clinical trial. Sounds like a mouthful. Can you break it down practically for our listeners, as there are so many important things to unpack?
Yes, absolutely. So, clinical trials is the way that all the new medications, new breakthroughs have come to fruition by many patients who have volunteered their efforts or time to be part of those new options, and also to help patients in the future kind of leaving a legacy. But
Mhm.
clinical trials are a difficult thing to navigate because first, they are sometimes administered in very unique centers. They are not available everywhere, and patients don't know about them. And physicians like myself, we love to help our patients, but they're busy. They don't have the time to go through all the criteria, look at what's available right now for you in real time, while we have other 20 patients in clinic that we are helping them in real time in front of us for a standard of care. And that's why we thought that helping the physician and helping the patient by being very patient centric and using AI and technology will be able to help patients to find treatment options, not only when you're eligible today, but maybe in the future, which is more relevant. So instead of having many patients missing clinical trial options, so for example, 99.9%, I'm just being data driven, of patients don't ever get into a clinical trial, but the 0.1% that does, they live longer and better. And at the same time, the about 60% of the trials are closing because there's not enough patients to enroll. So that clearly means there is a major disconnect between those two pieces of the puzzle, and we are trying to solve that. So in the practicality means, if you have a cancer diagnosis and the cancer is advanced, you need treatment options, and then you can rely on Massive Bio to help you to do this for free, and for your physician as well. So either is a trial in their own institution that you're helping them to get those patients in front of them easily for them to know, because even if I own my own practice and I have my own clinic, I may not remember all the criteria for all my patients, even for my own studies. Or there's a study across the institution or my referral network, or in a place where I send my patients, typically for second opinion and beyond, where there's a trial ready for them, and I know exactly when the time is right for the patient to go. So it's basically helping you across the way, and giving you all the options that you need, no matter where you are in your cancer journey.
And so, and how is that delivered? You mentioned that you guys match, the patients and the oncologists with the clinical trials. Is that through a computer system? Is that through, people? And how does it? How do you do that with Massive Buy? How does it work? And there's a question here. How do you think AI can play a role in fostering enrollment in clinical trials, particularly for underserved populations?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. So the main part is, well, it's a combination of both, right? So it's nothing can be a 100% computer, and doing it 100% manual defeats the purpose of the effort. Right? So the idea is combine the best of both worlds. So once the patient says, I want to be considered for clinical trials, I want to look at my options at least to know, then they sign a consent, so we can go into the it's called the ecosystem of electronic health records, and we access that information. Most of the electronic health records are all into like a page form, like a story form. It's not a structure, so we use AI to basically, an answer to that question that was posted here, to basically organize information that otherwise is disparate, that is in different places, and align it to translate it into criteria that could be matched to all the clinical trials that the patient may be eligible for in the region around where they live, the whole United States, or any other country that they may be interested to even enroll. And then match them in real time and tell them what they're exactly matched for, what they are potentially partial match for. Maybe there's a biomarker or genomic testing they need to pursue, and they haven't got it yet for any reason, and may make them eligible, and or what they're not eligible just yet or not anymore. So that gives them understanding of what is needed. All that is reviewed before release by oncology research nurse that actually understands clinical trials as well. And if the patient wants to enroll in the trial, we help that patient with what we call concierge services, which is basically getting the patient to the finish line, which is extremely hard. I mean, I have a patient of mine who just trying to get into clinical trials, and it's a perfect patient in terms of very healthy overall, otherwise beyond their cancer. And it was so hard because there's only 5 clinical trials in the whole United States. But using that and getting the patient there to understand where their limitations are, we're able to get the patient pre-screened for a biomarker the patient is eligible for, and now we're planning for the clinical trial enrollment. So all that can be solved by the combination of technology and getting concierge services at the end to get that patient there, because you need that human touch to at least make some of those connections. And that is not only helping all the patients, but also those patients who are underserved in clinical trials, which are so many, Hispanic, Black patients, many patients who are not represented in clinical trials despite being significant part of the population. And bearing a digital divide issue, if as long as they have a cell phone or they have access to some form of internet, which in the United States is pretty open, even with phones, we can actually help patients. So this is a way that AI can help us solve things, because it can extract data from multiple sources, kind of extrapolating into those things that structure in data points that otherwise didn't exist before, and help the patient to match where they're supposed to be. So I think this is a good opportunity for technology to make a very good use case to help patients to enroll in trials.
That's awesome. We talk about the statistics, right? So I recently learned that less than 5%, like you said, of all eligible adult patients even enroll. And from that number, 3% of that are minority groups. I actually read something today. Well, before that, the answer is probably complex. So what do you think are the greatest barriers for all comers and then for minorities? I read something today, which I'm going to ask you about, but what do you think is the barrier? Because it's even, forgetting minorities, I mean, they're minute, but overall, it's still not enrolling in clinical trials.
Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons, but the main reason is information lack of information. They don't have knowledge of these trials being even an option for them. The other one is trust. So having, someone who directs you to the right clinical trial using, the right tools. And then lastly, the support, right? The social determinants of health are so important because, things like transportation, insurance issues, getting the schedule of events of the trial and understanding what are the needs for them to be taking time off or travel to the place to get studied treatments are major issues that we need to consider them in the design of the trials themselves, but also having the sponsors of the studies and the institutions to facilitate the access and not being a barrier. And it's so interesting because as we are helping patients, we have helped over 100,000 patients to look for options for clinical trials. One of the major issues is first, they didn't know, right? Is that, oh, is this an option for me? Yes. Second, okay, but are you sure? I need to talk to my doctor first. And it's like, well, that's fine. But remember, you're going to see another doctor who is equally as certified as this person. And this is a research-oriented institution. That means that they have all the validation, they have the FDA, they have the sponsor, they have everyone on top of them. So at least something that you should consider to be guiding and helpful to you, and it's going to help your primary oncologist as well across the journey. And you have to own the journey. This is not your doctor's journey, is your journey in cancer care. And many times it's just like, oh, if my doctor doesn't let me, I don't want to. I'm like, no, you should be the one owning this, not your doctor, right? It's like, I'm not your dad. I'm just helping you here. So feel free to do whatever is needed to be better in what's going on with you. And lastly, having, those issues solved with transportation, with insurance, with all that, I think, the FDA and now Congress and the White House with Cancer X is helping with all those efforts. But still, a long way to go. So that's part of the initiatives that we're just having these discussions.
I read something today, which was, it says 33.33% of Black women distrust clinical trials compared to 4% of white women. And of course, we know the history, when it comes to the Black population. But even overall, it's still low. What do you think is going to change the needle on that? What do you think is going to change that where people are like, you know what? Clinical trial is almost like part of my standard of care. What do you think is going to get that mindset change? Because I feel like collectively, patients on a whole just distrust the clinical trials. I don't know if I myself would trust it. I don't know.
I think it's one of those things so that is so challenging because we need to basically, as you said, it has to be the standard of care. Like whenever you are talking to your doctor, the first question amongst all the things that you're asking is, okay, what are the trials I'm eligible for? Right. So it shouldn't be even like, can you check out if no, it's like which one was eligible for and which ones I'm not, and where should I go and why a trial is not an option for me right now. And they can be as honest like, well, I don't have trials here, but this is the next step that we can pursue. Or you are potentially eligible for a trial, but it's the same as what I'm giving you here, and I can give you this option as well. I mean, it has to be kind of like that empowerment of patients, knowing the same way you're doing a credit score when you're buying a house, or it has to be like that. It's like, what is my clinical trial opportunity right now? And in the future, I need to plan. And everyone should know what their options are at all times.
I think that's such a great point, because that's not the current thinking, and I think as we educate patients about it, and as doctors are getting these questions being asked of them more and more, I think that's how we're going to begin to shift that consciousness around clinical trials. Let's see, Peter says a great point that physicians are so busy with clinical practice to spend the time with patients and get them enrolled in the clinical trial, but we need to do a better job of asking and overcoming barriers to participation. Just like you said, what are the current resources in the U.S. that can help match patients with appropriate clinical trial? Well, yours is one of those, I would say. Is there anything else that you would add to that?
No, I think that of course there are certain patient advocacy groups that they also have similar resources. So PanCan, or for example, or Luz Gardner Foundation for Pancreas, or the American Cancer Society, Leukemia Lymphoma Society. All of them have resources, um, but they're of course specialized. And what we want to do at Massive Bio is to make it universal. You know,
Mhm.
no matter what cancer you have, where in your cancer journey, we're helping you, and we're also collaborating with those patient advocacy groups. So it's not like I like, you know, someone owns the whole thing. This is a cross collaboration, and if we don't work together, there's no way that we can have this open, you know, funnel for them. It's almost like a marketplace. You need a patient here and there, and the patient needs to go here versus the other one for the next trial and beyond. It has to become almost this, you know, open environment for the patients to always choose what's best for them at the real time. And those solutions are paving the way, hopefully, for the future.
You know, every time I do a tea talk, I learn something, you know, or at least it raises my consciousness. For example, now I feel like we need to bring on more guests like yourself talking about clinical trials because, again, I think the more we talk about it, and especially as a survivor myself, the more we talk about it, I think it's going to be easier to swallow. I have a couple more questions for you, Doc, and then I'm going to let you go because I know you have a crazy afternoon here. Where do you believe our greatest opportunities in cancer lie? Is it going to be research, treatment, incorporating the patient voice, or AI?
Uh, all of the above, but I think always being patient empowered and using the AI as a tool to make them more aware of their options. So having that patient centricity is going to be essential,
Mhm.
and that's the way that we can always be sure that we're meeting the patients where they are. So to me, that's the key thing, and anything else is just helping the patient to be in a better place. I want technology to be a catalyzer for that because that's going to solve a lot of the administrative and barriers that we find, which is, you know, knowledge, trust, ability to see that the data is in front of you. You know, that data is you know, ready for you to act upon, and ready to execute once you're, you know, moving forward with a clinical trial. So insurance verified, you know, what is the distance from you to the closest site that can be solved by AI. Is this doctor taking your insurance? Yes. Is the patient taking the right treatment before they become eligible? Yes. Is the site open and active? All that can be used by technology. So I think it's the integration of those solutions in the digital aspect, always around the patient, that is going to help us. And I think once again, having clinical trials as the default, not even before we think about the standard of care options. The clinical trial should be an essential part of the journey. So if there's anything that I want anyone to have, is that whenever they have the cancer diagnosis, is like, what are my clinical trial options? Just ask that question.
Okay, we lost a little bit of the doctor, the good doctor's audio, so we'll see if it comes back when he answers again. Uh, we'll ask his final question. Well, Peter says, what about integrating results from clinical trials and learning? What role can AI play in disseminating results and key findings to physicians in clinical practice? I don't know if we have your audio back, Doc. We'll try
Can
it.
you hear me?
Yep, can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, yeah. So integrating the results of clinical trials in learning, it's important. AI can organize data. All those large language models are now compiling the data and the information to make it accessible, and we can start doing predictions and analytics, so we can adapt clinical trials to, you know, the real world data that's coming up.
Mhm.
uh, if the patient is on a treatment option right now, and then maybe there's a genomic testing performed because there's progression of disease, we can use the same technology to surface clinical trials and best next steps in terms of standard of care options. So I think having the combination of both is key. And I think when you lost my audio, I think that the thing that I was saying is the call to action is
Mhm.
that always think, before you start even on standard of care options, is ask for yourself, what are my clinical trial options? Is there
Yes.
any trial that I'm eligible right now? I That's the key component that is gonna make it can make the difference for you, it can make the difference for your loved one, and it can make the difference for many others that you are helping by being part of the clinical trial environment. So it's always so important to me.
Yes. Uh, AI is fairly new, right? Tech's been around for a long time. AI is fairly new. Do you ever worry that AI will let us down? I mean, when I think of AI, of course, I think of Chat GPT, which I use heavily in my work. But and then of course, what you're doing at your level, it's even more complex. Do you ever worry it will let us down, or do you ever find that people distrust the AI in your work? I mean, how is that being embraced in the community on a whole?
Yeah, I think it's still an evolving field, and
Mhm.
it's all about the results that we provide. I think that if we are not part of the AI environment, then is still people are gonna still use it, but we need to make sure that it's used ethically, that
Yeah.
we feed the right information to it, and we have reliable sources. And that's what we're trying to use. At least for clinical trials with massive bio, is we try to surround ourselves in with institutions like work with the White House, working with the National Cancer Institute. So all the things that we're doing kind of revolve around those options in an agnostic way, so they promote trust,
Yeah.
and at the same time we can show results, so it becomes a virtuous cycle of positivity. It's like, okay, I was able to find my trial options, thank you massive bio, let's move forward and get other people being part of this. So I think that the challenge here is to make sure that we keep everything that we're doing very reputable, that is done by physicians and by patients who are really involved in the place, and that we can verify the results in an accurate way, so we can remain a reliable source. And that's why I don't think it's ever going to replace a physician. It's going to help us to be better, hopefully, and it's upon us to make sure that we don't feed the system with random stuff, garbage in, garbage out. The
Yes.
system has to be fed with the best evidence, with the most accurate information. And the data is the data. So if you're leaving for the trial because you fit the criteria, you should be able to enroll based on that criteria. So I think that's all that, at least for trials, it has a little bit of less of a risk of being diverted into conspiracy or something crazy like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. And like you said, I love how you answer that, because the more accurate findings that you guys find with the AI, the proof will be in the pudding, and the better the reputation of the AI will grow over time. So I think that's true. Last question: what keeps you motivated even when the task at hand seems so big? That's your final question.
Well, yeah, every day is a new challenge, but seeing the opportunities and how the field has evolved over the last few decades, when patients didn't have options and now they have um, a few more, where we are achieving certain patients with the right biomarkers because they're enrolling in clinical trials. That now they're living on a pill with their cancer, in control, sometimes in remission. We don't cure hypertension or diabetes right
Mhm.
now, but we still keep patients out of the hospital without strokes or with issues. They just become a chronic disease. In certain cancers now have become like that because of patients being on clinical trials. So to me, is seeing how technology has evolved to the point that we feel this is a potential reality, and
Yeah.
helping one patient at a time getting to that finish line of getting into a trial, and being part of the ecosystem that is really feeding the whole positive circuit of development and new options and hopefully new hopes.
Yeah.
It's what really drives me every day, and those exceptional responders give us always the opportunity to make things better. So it's
Yeah.
the little rewards that keeps us happy, and looking at the future, the future is brighter every day, so let's keep it like that.
I love it. I love it. Doc, I said that was the last question, but there was one question from the audience. I'm just gonna. Do you have time for one more
Yeah.
question? Okay. Uh, Ilana says, "What do you think of drug companies marketing their clinical trials on social media? Can this be trusted?"
Well, Of course, many of the things that are happening are fully vetted by the FDA, and also you may not know this, or the audience may not know it, but behind the scenes, anytime there is an advertisement for a clinical trial, it is reviewed by an ethics committee. So all this has been vetted to make sure that it's not coercive, that it doesn't give you false hopes, and that is just telling you exactly what is supposed to be displayed for, be trustful and confident. Of course, as long as it's an FDA pathway. I mean, if you're looking at a vitamin or something like that that comes randomly, that's a different story. But if it's a molecule that has what's called an IND application, and the trial is registered in clinicaltrials.gov, you should have confidence that at least has gone through that process of vetting, and if not, flag it. But most likely, it was vetted by the IRB. I work behind the scenes on all these things, and I know how much effort is put into making sure that all these promotions of trials are kept within the confines of ethical access. So yeah.
Well, we're going to give it this last word. This show is called T Talks because it was Sarah's idea was to base it off the T cells, right? T cells are happy cells. So we like to leave the audience, and you kind of already left me with something that's uplifting when you said, every day looks brighter, right? Which I agree in the cancer space. But if you had one more thing to say to that newly diagnosed person, or someone who who stumbled across this and said, wow, clinical trial, I never thought of that. What could you say to lift those T cells for someone who's on the journey?
So you may not know this, but a clinical trial may be what can really change your life for the better. So, and not only for yourself, but for others. So ask the question, am I eligible for a trial? For which ones? And just pose the question, because it's always going to be a positive development. You're not only helping yourself, you're helping someone else in the future, and you're making a legacy by helping to know what works for what patients and at what time. And when you see a new drug coming up, you know that you were part of those efforts. And some patients may just with that, they feel that they left a little dent in the future for not only themselves, but for future generations to come.
Well said. That's a wonderful way of looking at it. And Dr. Arturo, I thank you so much for, the ways how you've supported Total Health. I know you've been at some of our conferences, you've spoken there, and you've been just a good support for us. So we really do thank you for your time. Thank you for carving out the time this afternoon. I know you were at the hospital, so I really do appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. I just want to remind the audience that speaking of conferences, Total Health, register for a free upcoming MedEd conference. We're the largest provider of free ongoing medical education certificates. So we want to thank the good doctor again for being here and for answering our questions on clinical trial and AI. And we wish you, Doc, and Massive Bio all the best. Take care.
Same to you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.